Hello everyone, and welcome back to our real estate education series. Today we're diving into a crucial aspect of property management, leases. Whether you're a landlord or a tenant, understanding the ins and outs of lease contracts is essential for a smooth rental experience. So let's get started. A lease is more than just a piece of paper. It's a legal agreement that outlines the rights and obligations of both landlords and tenants. Essentially, it's a conveyance of temporary exclusive use of a property in exchange for rent. But what exactly does that entail? Tenants, you have certain rights during the lease term, including exclusive possession and use of the property, quiet enjoyment, and the ability to profit from its use. However, these rights come with responsibilities. You're obligated to pay rent on time, maintain the property's condition, and comply with the building rules and regulations. For a lease to be valid, it must meet certain requirements. This includes identifying the property accurately, providing exclusive possession to the tenant, and ensuring legal and permitted use, and exchanging consideration, typically rent payments. Additionally, both parties must accept the terms of the lease, usually through signatures. A landlord always needs to sign a lease to convey interest. However, it's not required by the tenant. They should do it anyways, so they can enforce their end of the contract. And leases with multiple lessees assume all responsibility for their end. If one person leaves, the other lessees will be responsible for the entirety of the rent still. Now let's break down some essential clauses you'll find in lease agreements. The clauses of a lease define the contractual relationship between the landlord and the tenant. The rent clause specifies the payment details, including amount, frequency, and penalties for late payment. Additionally, landlords may require a security deposit to cover potential damages or defaults, with state laws regulating its handling. The lease term defines the duration of the tenancy. Without a specified term, it's generally considered a tenancy at will, cancelable upon proper notice. This clause outlines who's responsible for property upkeep. Typically, tenants handle routine maintenance, while landlords are responsible for major repairs and capital improvements in residential leases. But of course, these terms are completely negotiable between the two parties. This options clause offers the tenant an opportunity to choose a course of action in the future, typically to renew the lease or buy the property, or possibly to lease an additional adjoining space. Tenants aren't required to exercise this clause. However, if they do, the landlord must comply with it. Tenants may sublet or assign their leasehold interest, subject to landlord approval. Subleasing involves transferring a portion of the lease, while assignment transfers the entire interest to a third party. Now let's explore the different types of leases you might encounter. In a gross lease, the landlord covers operating expenses like utilities and maintenance, while tenants pay a fixed rent. These leases are typically a little bit more expensive in order for the landlord to recoup some of his additional costs, common in residential and office properties. Net leases, also known as a triple net lease, requires tenants to cover expenses like taxes and insurance, in addition to their rent. This type of lease is prevalent in commercial agreements. Essentially, the landlord is passing his expenses over to the tenant with a smaller base rent. Retail properties often use percentage leases, where tenants pay a base rent plus a percentage of their gross sales. Residential leases are typically gross leases, while commercial leases can be gross, net, or percentage leases, depending on the property and the tenant. Residential leases are typically a lot shorter, 1 to 2 years, while commercial leases are usually 3 to 7 years and can run all the way up to 25 years. With these longer leases, some owners offer TIs, or tenant improvements, and cover the cost of updating the unit to meet the specific needs of the lessee. Longer lease contracts mean a lot of rental expense, so it's important for clauses to be negotiated and clear for both parties because defaults can rock both worlds. Ground leases involve leasing land only, often for long-term development projects, while the landlord retains ownership of the improvements. A ground lease offers owners, developers, and users various financing, appreciation, and tax advantages. The owner could benefit from the increase in land value based on the new development taking place on it. These are typically long-term leases and can range from 30 to 50 years. Lastly, we have leasing of rights, which instead of leasing exclusive use of a property, an owner will lease the right to use the resources on it. This is most commonly the leasing of water rights, air rights, or mineral rights. If a party breaches the lease, the other party may pursue legal action, such as suing for damages or specific performance. Suing for specific performance would make either party uphold a portion of the lease that they were refusing to do, like replacing a broken furnace in a house. A lease can terminate for various reasons, including breach of contract, term expiration, mutual agreement, property destruction, condemnation, or the death of either party, among other things. Typically, a breach occurs when a tenant refuses to pay rent, in which case a landlord will file a suit for possession or a suit for eviction and legally repossess the property. And following that, they can also sue for damages if the property is beat up upon repossession. And on the other side of the coin, a tenant can terminate their lease through a constructive eviction if the landlord fails to hold up his end of the lease. If a roof goes unfixed and water damage ensues to the tenant's property, the tenant can move out, cancel the contract, and sue for the damage to their stuff. Lastly, we'll touch on the Uniform Residential Landlord-Tenant Act, which aims to standardize tenant-landlord relations and protect tenant rights. The URLTA addresses lease agreements, deposits, landlord and tenant obligations, access rights, eviction procedures, and more, serving as a model for state-level legislation. And there you have it, a comprehensive overview of leases in real estate. Whether you're a landlord or a tenant, understanding lease contracts is crucial for a successful rental experience. Stay tuned for more real estate insights and remember to always read the leases carefully. Thanks for watching. See you next time.